Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a figure who really generates intense reactions in American politics, Ilhan Omar.
Definitely intense.
She was, one of the first Muslim women in Congress, representing Minnesota's 5th district since her historic 2018 election. She's been right at the center of so many debates.
Absolutely. A really polarizing figure.
Interest.
So the question we're tackling, and this comes straight from one of our core sources, is this. Is Ilhan Omar a danger from within or more of a misunderstood voice?
That's the core tension, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll be trying to navigate the controversies, the complexities around her, using this detailed 3,000-word article to sort of unpack her public image and political moves.
And it's clear right away, like you said, opinions aren't mild. People either seem to strongly support her or intensely criticize her.
Exactly. Very little middle ground. So let's get into it.
It's pretty remarkable, one person sparking such different responses. This deep dive, using this article, lets us, look past the soundbite.
Right, get into the nuance. Yeah, explore her background, the specific controversies, and the wider impact she's had on the whole political scene.
Okay, so the article kicks off with her early life. It's quite a journey.
A really significant one.
Born in Mogadishu, Somalia, then fleeing the civil war when she was just 8, spent 4 years in a refugee camp in Kenya.
4 years.
And finally resettled in Minneapolis back in 1995. Became a U.S. citizen in 2000. It's a powerful story.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is how the article argues this history isn't just, a footnote. It fundamentally shaped her perspective.
How so?
Well, having lived through that kind of displacement, that instability, it likely gave her a real empathy for marginalized groups. A different lens for looking at social justice, human rights.
That makes sense. A lived experience that's pretty different from most in Congress.
Exactly. And it's a key question to keep in mind. How does that inform her priorities? Maybe differently than someone with a more conventional path.
Yeah. And you can see how that experience might have propelled her into politics, community organizing, then the Minnesota House in 2016.
Right. And then a quick jump to Congress in 2018, joining the squad.
Such a fast rise. And the article points out this contrast immediately. For supporters, it's like the American dream personified, bringing this vital, underrepresented view.
A success story.
But for her critics, that same background, it fuels suspicion. Questions about, where her real loyalties lie. It's a basic disagreement on how to even read her story.
That's such a critical point, isn't it? The same facts refugee experience, rapid political rise seen through totally opposite lenses.
Yeah.
For some, it shows the possibilities of American democracy. For others, it raises questions about, her connection to traditional American values or interests.
What does that say about our politics now? That even an origin story is so fought over.
It really highlights the polarization, I think.
So the article then gets into her legislative work. Things like universal health care, student debt relief, protecting refugees.
Pretty standard progressive policies on the face of it.
Right. But again, the article notes that critics often see her focus on bigger global justice issues or her criticisms of U.S. foreign policy.
As somehow being out of step.
Yeah, as potentially conflicting with American interests.
And this really hits on a major debate, doesn't it? How do we define American interests today in this interconnected world?
Good question.
Her supporters would probably argue that tackling global injustice, advocating for human rights, that does serve U.S. interests, promotes stability, cooperation.
Makes sense.
But critics tend to stick to a more traditional, maybe nation-first view. It just shows that fundamental split in approaching America's global role.
Okay, now let's shift to a really big flashpoint the article covers in detail. The 9/11 controversy.
Ah, yes, the 2019 Sarayar event remarks.
The phrase, "some people did something," that just ignited a firestorm.
It really did. And the article lays out the backlash. It was immediate. It was intense. You had President Trump tweeting about it.
I remember that.
Conservative media framing it. The narrative quickly became that she was, downplaying the horror of 9/11.
Minimizing it. Accused of lacking patriotism, not naming the attackers.
Exactly. That accusation that she was trivializing the deaths of thousands was incredibly damaging.
But the article is careful to also present her defense, the context.
Which is crucial.
Her full speech was about the surge in anti-Muslim feeling, the erosion of civil liberties for Muslim Americans after 9/11, and CARI's role in defending those rights.
Right. The argument from her camp is that those few words were deliberately pulled out of context.
Weaponized, even.
Weaponized, yeah.
Yeah.
Playing into existing Islamophobic biases, they'd argue.
It shows how easily a short phrase can be twisted, doesn't it? Taken out of a larger point.
Absolutely. And the article pushes us, you, the listener, to think about context in political talk, especially with sensitive stuff, traumatic events.
How often do nuanced points get lost or just deliberately ignored for a soundbite?
All the time. And what does that do to public understanding, to actual debate? It's a serious issue.
And the fallout for her personally was huge. The article mentions death threats.
Increased security, yeah. Calls for her to resign.
Even that House resolution condemning hate speech. It didn't name her, but the timing.
The implication was clear. It really cemented her image for many as this lightning rod figure.
Yeah. The 9/11 thing, as the article shows, became a defining moment in how she's perceived.
Definitely fueled that danger from within narrative. Gave critics a powerful line of attack about her loyalty, her grasp of national security.
It makes you wonder, how long can one comment, maybe poorly phrased, shape someone's entire image, affect their ability to talk about other things?
That's a really good question. It lingers.
Okay, so the article then moves into another really contentious area, accusations of anti-Semitism and her views on Israel.
Right. This is another major source of controversy.
There was the All About the Benjamins tweet in 2019, her questioning the allegiance of lawmakers who support Israel, her backing of the BDS movement.
And then that 2021 comparison, putting actions by the U.S. and Israel alongside those of Hamas and the Taliban.
That caused a big stir, even among Democrats.
It did. And the article details each of these, noting the bipartisan condemnation she often faced. The Benjamins tweet especially hit a nerve.
Why that one in particular?
Because it invoked that old, harmful anti-Semitic trope about Jewish money controlling politics.
Yeah.
Very sensitive territory.
And questioning allegiance.
Similar issue. Raised concerns about dual loyalty, another stereotype historically used against Jews.
Then there's BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions.
Yeah, her support for BDS is seen by many critics as rejecting Israel's right to exist, basically aiming to delegitimize the state.
And the comparison to Hamas and the Taliban?
That was widely seen as deeply offensive. Critics felt it minimized the actions of actual terrorist groups and drew a false equivalence.
But again, the article includes the other side, her defense.
Yes. Supporters argue her criticism targets specific Israeli government policies, not Jewish people.
Like the occupation, settlements.
Exactly. And they point to her apologies, like for the Benjamins tweet, as showing she understood the harm caused, even if unintended.
And her overall stance on Palestine.
Supporters frame it as part of her commitment to universal human rights, advocating for Palestinians.
So it really highlights that ongoing debate. Where's the line between criticizing Israeli policy and actual anti-Semitism?
It's a really tough line to navigate, and people have vastly different views on where it lies.
Her supporters argue strongly for the policy critique side, holding governments accountable.
While her critics see a pattern, language, imagery that they feel echoes anti-Semitic history and undermines Israel, a key U.S. ally.
It really forces you, the listener, to confront the sheer complexity of this issue. No easy answers.
None at all.
So pulling these threads together, the article then summarizes the case against her, the danger from within perspective.
Laying out the main arguments.
Basically, her 9/11 comments undermine security. Her Israel rhetoric weakens a key alliance. Her rhetoric is divisive, maybe even exploiting her identity.
Concerns about associations with groups like Sayar are mentioned too.
And her position on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, giving her, critics fear, undue influence on policy.
The article even brings up that Trojan horse analogy some critics use.
Suggesting she's using her platform to sort of erode American values or security from the inside?
That's the fear articulated by that side, yes. That her views are fundamentally at odds with the interests she's supposed to represent.
Okay, but then the article lays out the defense, the misunderstood advocate view.
Giving the counter-arguments equal weight.
This side stresses the missing context for the 9/11 remarks. Frames the Israel stance as legitimate policy critique, in line with international human rights concerns.
And points to the attacks she faces, often identity-based, right, like the center-back chants.
Exactly. It highlights her legislative work, stuff aimed at helping her constituents, benefiting Americans more broadly.
And positions her as someone pushing boundaries, advocating for free speech, challenging the status quo.
Trailblazer, basically, taking on powerful structures.
That's the view. It really emphasizes looking at the whole picture, not just isolated quotes or controversies.
And it raises the question, is the intense scrutiny she faces, partly because of her identity, her background.
A question her supporters definitely ask. Is her challenge to foreign policy norms being unfairly labeled as disloyal or dangerous?
Hmm.
Who gets to define acceptable discourse?
Especially on tricky subjects like foreign policy and human rights.
Precisely.
So the article then zooms out, looks at her broader impact on American politics.
Which is undeniable regardless of where you stand on her.
It points out the deep polarization she reflects and her ability to just spark these huge national conversations.
She definitely gets people talking.
And her significance, as one of the few Muslim women in Congress, even now in 2025, how that identity itself fuels accusations, forces conversations about what American means.
And how much dissent we tolerate.
Yeah. The article also mentions her cultural influence, clashing with figures like Trump, even Pelosi sometimes, and her resilience, weathering these storms.
It's true. She's become this focal point for so many tensions in America today. Identity, religion, belonging, the nature of debate itself. It all seems to converge around her.
Her ability to provoke such strong reactions, good and bad, says a lot about our current political climate, doesn't it?
It really does. About the divisions, the struggle to define a shared identity in a diverse country.
Okay, so finally, the article tries to weigh the evidence. It doesn't shy away from the critics' concerns.
Acknowledges the worries about her rhetoric potentially creating division, yeah.
But it also notes the evidence for her being an active threat is, well, circumstantial.
Right, no smoking gun, no explicit endorsement of terrorism in the 9/11 comments despite the interpretation.
And her views on Israel, while controversial, do align with certain strands of human rights critique.
So the article suggests the real danger might be the intense polarization she embodies, but adds that's a shared problem, not just her fault.
A societal challenge.
Exactly. And ultimately, it argues her presence forces America to look in the mirror, to confront its own values on free speech, diversity, accepting dissent.
It avoids taking a definitive stance, which seems right for someone so complex.
Yeah, encourages a more nuanced view, acknowledges valid criticisms, but also the potential for misreading things, for politically motivated attacks.
And it forces us to think about our own biases.
Right.
How we interpret her probably says something about our own views on identity, loyalty, dissent.
Absolutely.
So wrapping up this deep dive based on the article, it's clear that first question, danger from within, or misunderstood voice, it just doesn't have a simple yes or no.
Definitely not. She provokes these powerful, often totally opposite reactions.
The analysis really highlights those core tensions we talked about, that line between critique and harmful rhetoric.
How much identity shapes political talk.
And just the sheer difficulty of finding common ground in this polarized time.
Precisely.
And the article leaves us with this final thought. Whether you see her as a threat really depends on how you see dissent itself.
Is dissent a danger to stability? Or is it maybe a necessary catalyst for change, for progress?
Her story, the article suggests, reflects these bigger American tensions about immigration, religion, the role of criticism in a democracy.
Forces that aren't going away, they'll keep shaping the country's future.
It definitely leaves you, the listener, with a lot to think about regarding your own perspective on these really complex issues we've unpacked today.